Hey everyone, welcome back to The Deep Codes Behind Britain's Rise. I'm Barbara. This is the podcast where we don't just tell stories, we decode the system behind the story.
Hello, I'm Alex. We break down the power plays, the institutions, and the overlooked turning points that shaped Britain into a global force.
Today's episode, Before the Empire. The groundwork in Elizabeth I's reign. And here's the real question. When did Britain really start becoming Britain?
The answer might surprise you. You see, the year 1492 marked the dawn of Europe's global age. That's when Columbus reached the Americas and effectively opened the floodgates to overseas exploration and colonization. And for the century that followed, Spain and Portugal quickly rose to prominence, truly dominating what we might call the golden age of empire. All that incredible wealth from the New World, it flowed almost exclusively into Iberian coffers.
Wow! So Spain and Portugal were totally, utterly in the spotlight then? Like throwing confetti and getting all the headlines while everyone else just stood by? What about everyone else then, Alex? Like the Dutch, the French, us?
Precisely. While Spain and Portugal definitely claimed the spotlight, the other powers, namely the Dutch, the French, and the English, were quietly preparing to join that very same global race. They just weren't making as much noise about it.
So where was England during this early scramble for empire? Were they just having tea parties and hoping for the best while everyone else was conquering continents? Had it already started showing any signs of the global dominance it would one day achieve as the British Empire? Because it feels a bit slow off the mark.
That's the central question of this episode, Barbara. We're going to zoom in on the formative period of England's overseas ambitions, from its first officially sanctioned voyage in 1496, right up to the end of Queen Elizabeth I's reign in 1603.
Queen Elizabeth I. She's always a highlight, isn't she? A warm, knowing chuckle. Our virgin queen, who somehow always managed to turn a crisis into a comeback. You just knew she had some tricks up her sleeve.
Absolutely. And in particular, we'll focus on her 45 years on the throne, a period that genuinely laid the groundwork for England's transformation from what was then a rather peripheral island kingdom to a truly rising maritime power. It was during this era that England's imperial ambition didn't just begin, it took flight.
Okay, Alex, you just said England's imperial ambition took flight during Elizabeth's reign. That sounds huge. But earlier, you described them as just a peripheral island kingdom. So how did that actually work? Were they secretly building grand fleets or something equally dramatic already? I'm genuinely curious.
That's the crux of it, Barbara. If we're strictly talking about tangible wealth, the gold, the vast colonies, the big, imposing navies, honestly, Britain's start was pretty barren. While Spain and Portugal were absolutely dominating that first century, they were doing the truly flashy, headline-making things.
Flashy, as in literally hauling in tons of treasure, like mountains of it? That sounds like something out of a movie.
Exactly. Spain was busy conquering South America, shipping back what I can only describe as mountains of gold and silver. We're talking over 200,000 kilograms of gold and 18.6 million kilograms of silver in the 16th century alone. And Portugal? They were cornering the incredibly lucrative eastern spice routes. Make no mistake, they were the rock stars of the age.
Wow, that's an insane amount of wealth. So England really had nothing to show for itself during that time? No exotic spices, no shiny new coins, just fishing? How did they even scrape by as a nation then? That's wild.
Pretty much nothing, Barbara. Our sole gain was indeed those cold Newfoundland fishing grounds. We were barely just scraping by with fish. At that time, Britain truly felt like a laggard, standing on the shore, a mere spectator without a ticket to the grand show of global expansion. But, and this is crucial to understand, history isn't shaped solely by those immediately visible resources. There's always a deeper game being played.
A deeper game. So if it wasn't about the gold and the fleets, or even the vast lands, then what was it about? There must have been some secret advantage, right? I'm sensing a big reveal here. Tell me more.
There absolutely is. This is where it gets really interesting. While England looked behind in the race for material riches, it was quietly undergoing a profound transformation on a less visible, more fundamental level. Especially during Queen Elizabeth I's 45-year reign, the country gradually shifted from what was primarily an inland agricultural state into a truly commercial and seafaring nation.
So it wasn't just about getting bigger, it was about fundamentally changing who they were as a people? Like a caterpillar turning into a butterfly, but on a national scale.
Exactly. As historian John Seeley so astutely noted in The Expansion of England, it was during this very era that Britain completed its psychological shift toward the sea. And a big part of that remarkable transformation was thanks to a rather peculiar stroke of accidental good fortune. The simple fact that Britain had no massive gold or silver mines to plunder itself.
Accidental good fortune because they didn't have gold? Wait, that sounds completely counterintuitive. Usually, more resources equal more power, right? My mind is a little blown here. How on earth is not having gold a good thing for a rising power?
Precisely, Barbara. Spain's perceived resource advantage paradoxically turned out to be a curse. That sudden immense flood of precious metals brought short-term wealth, yes, but it ironically sowed the seeds of long-term crisis. We saw soaring prices, industries collapsing because domestic production couldn't compete, and an economy utterly dependent on plunder rather than sustainable growth.
So it was like a sugar rush for Spain, but then a crash?
A perfect analogy. It's what economists famously call the curse of gold and silver, a phenomenon strikingly similar to the modern-day resource curse we unfortunately still see in places like Venezuela.
Wow. So while Spain basically got rich quick, but then stagnated, Britain, because it was dirt poor, as you put it, was essentially forced to do things differently, to innovate from scratch. That really flips how we think about what wealth actually means.
Exactly. Britain was compelled to build its nation on a much more solid footing. They systematically developed their financial systems, meticulously strengthened their institutions, actively encouraged innovation, and cultivated a robust credit and contract culture. This was the deep work.
So instead of just grabbing easy treasure, they were building the actual engine for future prosperity.
That's it. Viewed through this lens, that seemingly backward century became a deep reservoir where England quietly accumulated strength and subtly nurtured the true potential for empire. And that's what we'll dive into next, some of those key institutional innovations that laid this incredible foundation, starting with a rather peculiar dietary law.
Okay, Alex, you just talked about England building its strength in invisible ways, like a deep reservoir, and you hinted at a peculiar dietary law as one of those key institutional innovations. I'm intrigued. What on earth are fish days? Did the Queen just suddenly decide everyone needed more omega-3s, or was there some royal fishmonger she needed to boost?
Not quite, Barbara, though perhaps they wouldn't have minded the health benefits. In 1563,
Queen Elizabeth I's government passed an act rather grandly titled the Act for the Increase of the Navy and Maintenance of Navigation. And yes, it had a striking mandate.
A mandate? For eating? This sounds like big government got into everyone's kitchens, dictating dinner menus. I bet the royal chefs had a field day.
It really did. Among its key provisions, the law specifically required all English subjects to eat fish and prohibited them from eating meat on Wednesdays, Fridays, Saturdays, and throughout Lent. This unusual regulation soon became known, somewhat humorously, as Fish Days for All.
Wait, so the government literally told people what they could and couldn't eat on specific days? That's wild. My mom would have loved that kind of control. But seriously, was this some kind of leftover religious fasting thing trying to make a comeback? Because it sounds rather pious.
That's a great question, and it's a common misconception. But make no mistake, this wasn't about religious piety at all. This was a purely calculated act of national strategy driven by very practical concerns for England's future. Think less stained glass windows, more shipyard blueprints.
Wait, so the government literally told people what they could and couldn't eat on specific days? That's wild. My mom would have loved that kind of control. But seriously, was this some kind of leftover religious fasting thing trying to make a comeback? Because it sounds rather pious.
That's a great question, and it's a common misconception. But make no mistake, this wasn't about religious piety at all. This was a purely calculated act of national strategy driven by very practical concerns for England's future. Think less stained glass windows, more shipyard blueprints.
So they needed to get everyone thinking like grizzled old sailors, even if they were just simple farmers munching on mutton. That's quite the pivot. Did they hand out tiny spyglasses with every fish supper?
Precisely. The Elizabethan government aimed to change that national mindset, and they decided to start, quite literally, at the dinner table. The fish days were designed to artificially boost demand for fish, thereby jump-starting the fishing industry, and crucially, laying the groundwork for a future naval force. Fishing, you see, was the most accessible civilian activity tied directly to the sea.
I'm starting to connect the dots, Alex. So more fish equals more fishermen, and more fishermen equals more potential sailors for the Royal Navy down the line? That's so brilliant in its simplicity. It's almost sneaky.
Exactly, Barbara. This seemingly minor policy actually had three major strategic impacts. First, it stimulated the growth of the fishing industry. With demand legally guaranteed, fishing operations, especially the risky but profitable long-distance ventures, like those heading to the Newfoundland banks, expanded rapidly.
So it got people out onto those dangerous, freezing waters, practically forcing them to learn how to sail whether they liked it or not. Talk about on-the-job training.
Yes, which brings us to the second impact. It created a pipeline of seafaring talent. The rough, unpredictable waters of the North Atlantic served as a real-world training ground. Fishermen gained vital navigation, sailing, and survival skills, experience that would later feed directly into England's rapidly developing navy. These weren't just fishermen, they were, as you say, future naval recruits in disguise.
Oh, those poor, unsuspecting fishermen just trying to feed their families. And unbeknownst to them, they were part of a grand national scheme. What was the third and perhaps biggest impact then?
The third, and perhaps most profound impact, was that it reshaped the national mindset. By embedding eating fish into law, the government began subtly steering England away from its agrarian identity toward a maritime one. This laid the essential cultural and psychological groundwork for a truly seafaring nation. It changed how they saw themselves and their place in the world.
So a quirky dietary law was actually behavioral engineering on a national scale? Who knew fish suppers could be so revolutionary? That's incredible.
In short,
Fish days for all may have looked like a quirky dietary law, but it was in fact a highly sophisticated piece of statecraft. It's a classic example of how England, often lacking in obvious material resources, used clever institutional design and behavioral engineering to build the fundamental framework for its global maritime power. It's truly a deep code of their rise.
Okay, Alex, so the fish days were essentially stealth naval training? Genius! What other quirky, hidden strategies did Elizabethan England use to build its invisible power? I'm ready for more surprising revelations.
Well, Barbara, our next deep code isn't quirky at all. In fact, it's about something as dry, but as vital as it gets: money. In the 1560s and 1570s, England faced a really serious monetary crisis right at the heart of its economy.
A money crisis? Oh no! Like when your bank balance makes you gasp? What exactly was happening with the pound?
Precisely that kind of gasp, but on a national scale. The core problem was something called debasement of silver coinage. Essentially, many coins in circulation contained less silver than their official value suggested. This led to a classic case of what we call bad money driving out good.
Oh, those poor, unsuspecting fishermen just trying to feed their families. And unbeknownst to them, they were part of a grand national scheme. What was the third and perhaps biggest impact then?
The third, and perhaps most profound impact, was that it reshaped the national mindset. By embedding eating fish into law, the government began subtly steering England away from its agrarian identity toward a maritime one. This laid the essential cultural and psychological groundwork for a truly seafaring nation. It changed how they saw themselves and their place in the world.
Yikes! So the kingdom was sliding into a massive crisis of trust just because of some underweight coins? That sounds like a big problem for a country trying to make a name for itself.
It was, Barbara. And this is where Sir Thomas Gresham, a leading financier of the day, steps in. Gresham warned Queen Elizabeth that unless the government acted decisively, this flood of debased currency would permanently erode the nation's financial credibility. It could even threaten the stability of both the economy and the regime itself.
So a financial advisor basically told the Queen, "Your money's no good, Your Majesty." That takes guts. What did he suggest? A royal bakesace to raise funds?
Even bolder. He proposed a very radical remedy. The government should embark on a massive, costly operation to withdraw all the faulty coins from circulation and replace them with new, high-quality silver coinage. Coins whose silver content matched their face value.
That sounds incredibly expensive and complicated. You're talking about millions of coins. Did Elizabeth actually go for it? It seems like such a huge, slow gamble.
She did. And this is where Elizabeth showed truly exceptional foresight and political will. She adopted Gresham's plan in full. Over the next several years, England gradually, meticulously restored the integrity of its currency.
And did it work? Did the world trust the pound again?
Absolutely. International traders regained confidence in the pound, and England successfully re-established its financial reputation on the global stage. But here's the kicker, Barbara. This commitment to monetary stability didn't end there. It became a defining feature of English policy for the next 370 years.
Whoa, 370 years? That's unheard of. Most countries' currencies are like roller coasters. What's the significance of that kind of stability?
It's profound. As the renowned French historian Fernand Braudel later observed, while the currencies of other European powers rose and fell chaotically, the English pound carved out a rare trajectory of long-term stability. It effectively became the backbone of England's evolving commercial empire and eventually of the global financial system itself.
So
stabilizing money wasn't just about good economics. It was like building a superpower out of trust. That's way more interesting than just counting shillings.
Precisely. This episode reveals far more than just a savvy economic reform. It reflects a profound national commitment to rule-based order, institutional trust, and contractual integrity. These are all characteristics that would come to define British global dominance in the centuries ahead. Unlike any other European state at the time, England was willing to pay the high price for credibility, and in doing so, it built something far more powerful than fleets or fortresses, an enduring reputation for financial trustworthiness.
Wow. So building this deep, invisible code of trust actually paid off much more than any quick gold grab ever could. Mind blown again.
Stabilizing currency might not seem glamorous, but it truly laid the groundwork for everything that followed, from the rise of London as a financial center to the vast credit networks that fueled empire. As we're seeing, this quiet reform was one of Britain's most potent invisible assets.
Okay, Alex, so fish days built a navy and stabilizing the pound built trust. Both incredibly clever, if a little unexpected. What's next on this list of Elizabethan deep codes? Are we talking about more financial wizardry or perhaps some sneaky trade agreements?
Even more fundamental, Barbara, our next hidden asset is the patent system. During Elizabeth I's reign, England saw a significant leap in its industrial and commercial development. We're talking about a transformation, particularly in the woolen textile sector.
Wool? Seriously? Like making jumpers and socks? That sounds a bit less exciting than global empires and gold. What's so special about wool?
Ah, but this wasn't just any wool. England moved from producing coarse woolen cloth to embracing the highly refined techniques of fine woolen manufacture, which was considered the absolute highest standard in Europe at the time. This wasn't just a technical upgrade, it was a deeply institutional shift.
So they got better at making fancy fabric. But how did that make them a global powerhouse? And what did patents have to do with it, considering modern patents didn't exist yet?
You're right. The modern patent system wasn't formally established until 1624 with the Statute of Monopolies. However, the basic idea was already in play. The Crown issued letters patent, which essentially granted individuals exclusive rights to operate certain businesses or use specific technologies.
Exclusive rights? So like a royal permission slip to be the only one doing something? Sounds powerful.
Exactly. These early patents functioned as legal monopolies designed specifically to reward innovation and protect intellectual capital. Now, imagine this happening against the backdrop of Europe.
Oh, Europe in the 16th century. Lots of fancy hats and religious wars, right? Always a bit chaotic.
Precisely. Europe was in constant turmoil. Religious wars, like the French Wars of Religion, and conflicts between Spain and the Dutch rebels pushed many highly skilled artisans and engineers to flee the continent. They were literally economic refugees seeking safety.
Aha! So England saw these highly skilled people looking for a new home and thought, bingo, free talent. Did they roll out the red carpet, perhaps, with a marching band and some roasted beef?
They absolutely did, Barbara. Sensing this incredible opportunity, the Elizabethan state welcomed them with open arms. And here's the key. These foreign specialists were often granted far more generous patents than anything local craftsmen could hope for. They weren't just getting safe haven, they were getting powerful economic incentives.
So they essentially offered these brilliant minds a legal monopoly in England. That's quite the lure. Can you give us an example of how this actually worked?
Certainly. One excellent illustrative case is that of Peter Baum, a Flemish immigrant. Elizabeth granted him a 20-year patent for his improved textile machinery.
His innovations were crucial in shifting England's wool industry from low-end coarse cloth to that higher-quality fine production we mentioned. This dramatically increased its value on the international market.
So it wasn't just about importing machines, it was importing the brains behind the machines and giving them VIP treatment. That's smart.
It truly was. Through this forward-thinking combination of legal tools and economic vision, England effectively turned itself into a sanctuary for talent and a laboratory for innovation. This wasn't merely a bureaucratic instrument, it was a strategic weapon.
A strategic weapon for making better fabric? It seems so mundane, yet you're saying it built an empire? My mind is doing mental gymnastics here.
Exactly. It allowed England to absorb the best technology and minds from abroad and use them to build a stronger industrial base. This, Barbara, laid critical groundwork for what would later become the Industrial Revolution itself.
Wow. So, fish days for sailors, stable money for trust, and patents for brilliant inventors. It's all interconnected. Who would have thought?
Precisely. By institutionalizing practices like fish days to support naval manpower, stabilizing the pound sterling to anchor national credit, and using the patent system to attract foreign innovation, Elizabeth in England wasn't just reacting to its lack of gold or colonies. It was quietly assembling the core infrastructure of a global power. These seemingly modest reforms laid the invisible but essential foundation for Britain's rise as an imperial and industrial giant.
Okay, Alex, so fish days for sailors, stable money for trust, and patents for brilliant inventors. It's all interconnected. Who would have thought these quiet, almost hidden moves were building an empire?
Precisely, Barbara. It was exactly these intangible assets, not gold, not vast colonies, not even those exotic spices, that allowed Britain to quietly build strength in the first century of the Age of Exploration, despite its late start. While Spain and Portugal raced ahead in the 1500s, carving up the globe with swords and crosses, England often seemed to lag behind. But that was just on the surface.
So they were like the tortoise in the global race, secretly building a rocket engine while the hares were just sprinting ahead with their raw speed and shiny bits.
A perfect analogy. Beneath the surface, England was indeed preparing, slowly crafting what would become a truly formidable latecomer advantage. As time passed and global tides shifted, England didn't just begin to close the gap, it compensated for its lack of material wealth with institutional strength, a focused maritime strategy, and a profound cultural transformation.
And in the end, it didn't just catch up, it actually overtook its rivals. So all that quiet groundwork, all those deep codes, eventually paid off in a massive, world-changing way?
Absolutely. It evolved into that globe-spanning British Empire where the sun famously never set. This whole trajectory, frankly, forces us to rethink what resource advantage truly means. A nation's long-term success doesn't hinge solely on gold reserves, colonial headcounts, or abundant natural riches.
So it's not about what you have initially, but about how you build what you have. And ultimately, what you become as a nation, that's a huge mindset shift.
Exactly. Instead, it depends on the capacity to build durable institutions, foster national resilience, and sustain global credibility. As historian J.R. Seeley observed, it was during Elizabeth I's reign that England made its most crucial psychological pivot.
A psychological pivot? That sounds heavy. What did Seeley say exactly? Give us the juicy quote.
He put it quite powerfully. It ceased to be merely a land power and became, for the first time, a sea power in the full sense. Those 45 years of Elizabeth's rule weren't just a takeoff point for English naval and commercial activity, they marked the awakening of global ambition and the crystallization of England's oceanic identity.
That's incredible. And you said this all happened not because they had abundant resources, but precisely because they didn't? Talk about irony serving up an empire.
Precisely, Barbara. That's the beautiful irony. Unlike Spain and Portugal, whose empires were supercharged by gold and silver stolen from the Americas, England's early voyages brought back almost nothing. But this scarcity, this deprivation of easy wealth, became a hidden blessing. England had no choice but to forge a different path.
A different path. So instead of just grabbing quick riches, they focused on what exactly? Give us the bullet points, Alex.
Not plunder, but sea lane control. Not mass colonization for immediate extraction, but naval buildup and complex trade networks. And crucially, not short-term extraction, but long-term investment in institutions and credit systems. In short, necessity became a driver of innovation.
Wow. So the lack of easy gold actually forced them to be strategically smarter and build these incredibly deep, intricate foundations? That's a huge lesson not just for history, but for life.
It really is. And this leads us to a deeper, more thought-provoking question, Barbara. Why do some nations surrounded by oceans never become maritime powers?
That's a fantastic question, because you'd think, geographically, it'd be a no-brainer to look to the sea. Why wouldn't everyone?
Exactly. Take China, for instance. With its vast coastline and incredibly advanced naval capability in the Ming Dynasty, it eventually chose self-isolation after Zheng He's voyages, turning inland and embracing the tribute-based land empire model. Japan, too, remained closed to the outside world for centuries, seeing overseas ventures as almost transgressive. And Germany, despite access to the North and Baltic Seas, fundamentally anchored its strategic identity in continental Europe until the late 19th century.
So it's not about the water around you, it's about the water in you, like in your national DNA. That's brilliant.
Precisely. But England, a small island with limited natural resources, chose to embrace the sea, not out of geographic destiny, but because of deliberate institutional design and cultural adaptation. What happened under Elizabeth wasn't just statecraft, it was the systematic organization of risk. Parliament controlled finance, privateering licenses, royal trading charters, and that powerful spirit of contractual trust all laid the solid foundation for a maritime economy.
So the real question isn't just, do you have access to the sea? Is it more like, do you have the will and the framework to truly leverage the sea?
That's it, Barbara. The real question is, do you have the institutions and the mindset to turn toward the sea and profit from it?
Wow, Alex, that's such a powerful way to end this discussion. So we finally understood how Elizabethan England, through seemingly odd invisible assets like fish days, a stable currency, and those smart patent policies, quietly built the real groundwork for a global empire. Who knew that lacking gold could actually be such a powerful motivator for national greatness? That's truly an eye-opener.
Indeed, Barbara. Today, we've decoded some of those fundamental, deep codes that laid the groundwork. We've seen how Britain, from being a peripheral island kingdom, transformed itself through institutional innovation and cultural adaptation, accumulating powerful, unseen momentum.
It's absolutely fascinating. These seemingly mundane policies, even quirky ones, built something so colossal. You really do decode the system behind the story. But now I've got a burning question. How did these invisible foundations, like the fishing policies, the credit reform, the patent incentives, actually translate into concrete global power and massive fortunes? My brain is buzzing with curiosity.
That's an excellent question, Barbara. And it's precisely the core of our next episode. We're diving headfirst into a period brimming with opportunity and controversy, the triangular trade.
Ooh, the triangle trade. I've heard that phrase before, and it sounds like quite the epic tale. Does it have anything to do with spices or silk?
It does. We'll unveil how a sophisticated system of commerce, driven by state-backed institutions and merchant ambition, gave England its first truly massive fortune and helped define a global trading order that would underpin its empire for centuries.
A first massive fortune and a global trading order? Sounds like things are about to get even more intense and far-reaching. You absolutely won't want to miss that one.
Exactly. And if you've enjoyed today's deep dive into England's invisible beginnings, if you found these deep codes as intriguing as we have,
Then be sure to follow us, leave a 5-star review, and share this show with someone who loves history with a fascinating twist. Your support is what keeps us decoding.
see you next time on the deep codes behind Britain's rise.